Hello my dears and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon. This back here, that's Bernard. He's my October co-host. I think this is going to be our last video with him for 2022. But he's happy to be here. I'm happy to have him. October's flown by. Today I'm going to be telling you about my favorite horror novels. We've got some newer releases, some classics. I've tried to keep in mind that, you know, we're all different types of horror readers. Some people love horror already. Some of you might be wanting to just kind of dip your toe in and start with something not too scary. So I've kept that in mind when choosing these books, and hopefully there's something for everyone. Now, of course, what's going to scare me might not be what scares you. So, you know, these are just my opinions. But let's get on into it. Otherwise, it's going to be a very long video. First up, we have one of my favorite horror releases of the past, 5 to 10 years. I thought it was excellent. I went in kind of with no expectations. I had never heard of the author before, and I was absolutely blown away by It Will Just Be Us by Jo Kaplan. If you've been around my channel for a while, you've heard me talk about her and this book and how much I love all of it. Both her and this book. This is a haunted house story, which is my personal brand of horror, my favorite. And when I tell you that this scared the pants off of me, I'm not exaggerating. It's about a woman who returns to her childhood home where her mother and her sister live. Her sister is pregnant, about to have a baby, and it just really takes off from there. There are some scenes in this book that I will be lying in bed and it will come into my mind for no reason, and I'm just like, why are you here right now? Beat it, bozo. Because they just scared me so much, and that's high praise. That's what I want from a haunted house story, and she did it. I think she also has a new book out now. I think it's called When the Night Bell Rings, I think, and that's on the top of my to buy list because I love her a lot. Next up, we have a classic, like a classic. And this is, I can't remember the exact year this was written. Let me see if it says in here. Oh, 1872. This is widely regarded as one of the first vampire novels, and that is Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. And I love this. It's very short, very short. It's a quick read, but it's just about this intense woman who's a vampire named Carmilla. That's really all you need to know. It's a wild ride, and I loved it. And it was so good. It's said to have been one of Bram Stoker's big inspiration for writing Dracula. And you can definitely see that. Loved it. Would recommend. Next up, we have another classic, and that is Rosemary's Baby. If you haven't read this, read this. Start with this. It's about a couple that moves into an affluent apartment building in Manhattan, and everything goes sideways from there. There's some weird things going on with the building, with her neighbors. She gets pregnant, hence the title, Rosemary's Baby. And just a lot of really weird, unsettling things happen. And I was watching a video recently I was watching a video, Books and Lala video. She's a booktuber here on the platform, and I like how she describes the two different sort of types of horror. There's the horror where you are afraid. The audience, you're afraid. And then there's the kind where as the audience, you're afraid for the characters. Like, it might not scare you so much, but you know that they're afraid, and that's what makes it horror. And I think that's kind of in the latter category. You're afraid for them, for her. And it's an excellent read, perfect for this time of year. Would recommend. Next up, I mean, no list would be complete without a Stephen King, right? So I didn't know what to add. I thought The Shining, which if you know me, it should not be a surprise that I love The Shining. But where I think Stephen King really shines, at least for my personal taste, is in his short story collections. I feel like he's the master of an ambiguous short story, and I love those. So I went with Full Dark, No Stars. First of all, it's one of my all-time favorite book titles. One that I wish I had come up with for a book of mine. It's just so good. Full Dark, No Stars, that sets the tone immediately in such a beautiful way. It's a collection of short stories, and they're all fantastic. Another Stephen King short story that I would definitely recommend that is not in this book, it's in his other collection, Everything's Eventual, which is also a great title, and also one I thought about talking about today, is 1408. That's one of my all-time favorite Stephen King stories, but as a collection I went with this one, but also 1408's really good. And it's also a movie starring John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. So there you go. Next up, this author recently passed away, like a couple weeks ago, I think. It could be a couple months at this point since time is just flying by in this chaotic blur. But anyway, this is Pierce Straub and Ghost Story. This is excellent. It's about a group of men who get together every year to tell each other stories. Ghost stories. I went into this knowing nothing about it, and I loved it. I loved it. It's the only Peter Straub that I've read so far. I hope I'm saying that last name right, Straub. That I've read so far, mainly because when I started looking into him as an author, everyone said to start with this. Loved it. Would definitely recommend. It's definitely creepy, but not too scary. So keep that in mind. This is one of my favorite new authors that I've discovered. New to me. She's been writing for a while. But I think she's fantastic, and I've read 3 of her books and I've loved all of them. But this one I think is my favorite, and that's Jennifer McMahon is the author, and this book is The Drowning Kind. Now, if you don't want something that's too scary, but a little spooky, this is a great one. It's the story of 2 sisters and the home they grew up in, basically. I don't want to say too much about this one, but it's so good. This is one I've read twice already because I love it so much. It shifts back and forth between timelines because there's a body of water in the backyard of the house. I think it's their grandmother's house. And there's something a little spooky, a little magical, but in a bad way about the water. Would recommend. If you don't want something too scary, this is a great one. Jennifer McMahon's amazing. I'd actually recommend all 3 of the books of hers that I've read. And that's The Invited, which I almost put on this list instead of this one, but in the end went with this one. The Invited looks at the idea of what if instead of moving into a haunted house you built one, which that's such a genius idea, I think. And then The Children on the Hill, also great. So I would recommend any of those to anyone who doesn't want anything too scary, but still kind of get to participate in reading horror, you know? This one is a doozy. This is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This one is, this one's scary. This one scared me, at least. I'm a member of some horror groups on Facebook, and a lot of times when someone picks this up, they'll post about it saying, I'm very confused, is that normal? And the answer I and pretty much everyone gives to that question when they see it is yes, that's normal. It will all come together in the end. And I thought this was just so clever, so detailed. The amount of planning and plotting and detail that had to go into this, fantastic. This is about a man who lives in the last house on Needless Street. It's about his cat. It's about a young girl. And it's about their story. And it's basically, I'm just gonna read you the inside flap here and that'll give you an idea. So it says, in a boarded up house on a dead-end street at the edge of wild Washington woods lives a family of 3. A teenage girl who isn't allowed outside, not after last time. A man who drinks alone in front of his TV, trying to ignore the gaps in his memory, and a house cat who loves napping and reading the Bible. If that doesn't make you curious, I don't know what will. And it did. This had some scenes that really spooked me. There's a feeling of anxiety that comes about when you're reading it because you don't know what's going on. You know something very bad's happening, but you don't know what it is. Now, I will say fairly early on, I was able to pinpoint one of the things that was going to be a twist, which is not, I'm not complaining about that. I think it's laid out for you to do that. But then the experience becomes seeing how she's going to get to that point. I thought it was so good. I loved it. 5-star read for me. Next up, speaking of favorite authors and not being able to choose, I've read 3 books from this author. He's a Canadian author who I just think is an absolute genius, and that's Ian Reid. The one I'm formally going to be recommending in this video is Foe. First of all, this cover is just outstanding. This book is about a couple that lives on a farm. And then something happens. They get involved in an experiment where the husband, I don't know how much to say about this either. I'm just going to read you the back. That way I'll know what isn't a spoiler because it's on the back. Junior and Hen are a quiet married couple. They live a comfortable, isolated life on their farm, far from the city lights, but in close quarters with each other. One day, a stranger from the city arrives with surprising news. Junior has been randomly selected to travel away from the farm, very far away. The most unusual part, arrangements have already been made so that when he leaves, Hen won't have a chance to miss him at all because she won't be left alone, not even for a moment. Hen will have company, familiar company. And the thing about Ian Reid, so I've got this one here. I've also got I'm Thinking of Ending Things by him, which was turned into a Netflix movie. This one's also getting a movie starring Paul Mescal and Saoirse Ronan. Cannot wait for that. The thing about Ian, and I recently did another book talk on a book of his that just came out on my birthday, September 27th, that I don't have a physical copy of yet because I had an EARC. And that's We Spread. The thing about Ian's books is that they fill you with dread. It's that kind of horror, and that gets me every time. You're scared, but you don't quite know why yet. Like in all of his books, you know something's very wrong, but you don't know what it is. And as you're peeling away the layers and then you finally get to the end, some questions are answered, some aren't. Which makes it extra scary to me. And I just think he's such a talented, skilled storyteller. I feel like you'd either love him or hate him. But if you want something that's not too scary in the traditional sense, but will get your heart racing because you are so fearful of something that you don't know what it is, definitely check out Ian Reid. I think my #1 recommend, Foe, then We Spread, then I'm Thinking of Ending Things, but they're all great. So you can look up what all 3 are about and then pick whichever one you think would suit your personal taste the best. And there you go, you guys. Those are my recommendations for my favorite horror novels. I felt like I think I do this every year. It's just something I love talking about with you guys, and it's perfect for the week of Halloween, or I guess the weekend now. You can pick up one of these books if you want, so you got something spooky to read throughout the weekend. And I hope you have a great and safe Halloween. That's Bernard signing off, I think, but I'm pretty sure. He'll see you again in 2023, and I will see you again soon.